Welcome to Lori's house, my virtual house here. I have two of the greatest people that I know online with me, and I'll start with Ray Scott. Ray Scott and I are friends, and he has an amazing background. He is one of the top 30 Detroit Pistons of all time, and he was the first African-American to win NBA Coach of the Year in 1974. And that's just scraping the surface. We'll get to a lot of his story. But I also have Bob Bennett, who is a longtime recording artist I've known since, I've known about you since the 80s, but known you since the 90s. Bob has recorded, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 or 12 albums over the years.
That's right. Depending on how you count them, that's right.
Yes, and he's very well known in both Christian music and on the folk circuit. And he is a prolific songwriter, is open for people like Amy Grant. And as I was just reminded, Coach, he also had a song recorded by Glenn Campbell.
Well, that doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd bring these two brilliant minds together here today, and we're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about sports, we're going to talk about music, probably history, and who knows what else will pop up. But Bob, this is your first time getting to talk to Coach. We like to call him Coach.
All right, indeed.
Not only with the Detroit Pistons, but also you coached girls basketball, the university level.
I did indeed. I actually started as an assistant coach, quickly went to a head coach, coached at university, and then I coached my daughters at St. Paul's Lutheran, and I coached 2 out of the 3. I don't know what I did because the third daughter declared that she would absolutely not play basketball. So that before my head couldn't get too big because she said, "Ooh, no, I'm not playing basketball," and that broke my heart. Because
maybe that's kind of backwards, because usually people start at university level, then go pro.
Well, it's the story of my life.
Well, now, how much of a gap between your leaving as a player and then being installed as a head coach? How much of a gap time was there between those two?
I actually retired in 1972, and I became an assistant coach in September of 1972, and I became a head coach in October of 1972.
So I had not long at all.
I went from player to assistant coach to head coach, and it occurred in the blink of an eye. I was totally that was not why I became an assistant coach. I became an assistant coach, but I wanted to become a captain of industry. But my best friend, the person that had mentored me, Earl Francis Lloyd, who was the first African-American to play in the National Basketball Association, he was the assistant coach and the chief scout for the Detroit Pistons. And he brought me to Detroit in 1961 as a #1 draft pick, but he brought me back in 1972 as his assistant. And I was his assistant for 7 games. He was fired and I was hired. And I was astounded. I couldn't even see myself taking the job because I was not prepared to do so. And he insisted that I take the job because he wanted to make sure that I was taken care of, because I had moved from Virginia, where I had concluded my career, back to Detroit, Michigan.
This is as Lori knows better than me, although I've had a little experience at it. It sounds like coaching and working in radio have the same thing. You're not really in that business until you've been fired and fired good. Yeah. Right.
That's the parameter of the business that we exist in when we get into the entertainment world. You're not part of management. And you're really not part of the working staff. You're kind of in this limbo of making decisions, but those decisions, your decisions are always public, and your decisions can always be countered by someone very quickly.
And I read a quote by you that when I read it, it like you had when you read something, you go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. But I just not thought of it before. That when you walked into the dressing room on your first day as head coach of the Pistons, you were the guy in the room being paid the least and with the most responsibility.
That's right. That's right.
That was,
because the difference between the American Basketball Association, where I retired, which was a 10-year league, and a 50-year-old league like the NBA, was obviously financial. The one team is playing on television, the other team plays on the radio, if that. The other team is very regional. The NBA players were now becoming national. So it had a whole different subset to it. And you go like, oh, I'm in the big time. I'm a big time coach. And, there's going to be more of a microscope on what I do. And so I tried to think it through as to how I was going to relate. Going back to what you were saying, Robert, how was I going to relate to guys in a locker room? Principally, 3 to 4 of them made more than I did, and a lot more. And then most of them made more than I did, just as a coach. And in those days, there were no assistant coaches. You were alone. There was no group. There was no board of directors with you. You were on your own.
boy.
But that was the entertainment world.
And that was a time when players were becoming coaches more often. I mean, now we have guys that didn't play the game, right?
Yeah, it's kind of been cyclical, because at one time, if you were not looked upon as a true coach if you had not played in the league. But the best coach in the league, who at that time was Arnold Red Auerbach of the Boston Celtics, had never played in the league. So there was kind of this example, but on the whole, which was comfortable for the owners, it was to select someone that they knew to run their franchise in terms of the players. And so the owners were making those decisions based on somebody that they had sitting on the bench or who was retiring, generally an older player that they would have confidence in, and they would make that guy the coach. And that was the way that it was coming out of the 40s and 50s.
So, by the way, I want people to know that we're in 3 different states. Ray is in Michigan, Bob is in California, Southern California, and I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And here's my Breaking Bad cup, That's all.
I love it.
But you both, this strikes me as this is kind of like one of those ultimate dinner party things where you get to pick the people that you want to have the evening conversation with. But you both have traveled all over the world and met so many people. Ray, tell us a little bit of your philosophy. And I love hearing you talk about this, but you've met famous people, Wilt Chamberlain, Muhammad Ali, just people at the very top of the world. But tell us your philosophy about people in general.
Well, I think, I'm kind of a Rudyard Kipling guy. You meet people and you leave them on the square. There's a saying that Rudyard Kipling had in his book, one of his great books, The Man Who Would Be King. And I always subscribe to that theory that you meet people. You don't meet, like meeting Bob today is just great, because Bob and I will meet and we will part on the square. We'll part friends, and that's the goal. But growing up in Philadelphia, because of the sections and the variations of the cities, that there was a talent, there was like a talent flow in Philadelphia. Like growing up in South Philadelphia, we had a Jewish section and an Italian section. Well, our Jewish section that was really, they were great business people, great people, phenomenal people that I remember to this day. I'm friends with until today. And the Italian kids that were so talented. I was observing the four aces and the Ames brothers, but the Ames brothers were from New York, but the four aces were Philly, and Bobby Rydell and Frankie Avalon. I mean, they were kids walking down the street that I went to high school across the street from their high school, you know, a Southern high school, and I went to South Catholic High School. So I was so aware of people having extraordinary talent. So you never walked down the street and just said, I just out talent everybody and I'm just phenomenal, because you could get into the next block and boy, you're talking to some guy that's just an incredible singer or an incredible student or a credible businessman. So I always tried to make sure as I grew that I met people fairly and treated them fairly and treated them as I would want to be treated. And so that was just a big philosophical piece to me of Philadelphia that lives within me today. And a lot of it comes from my schooling, which was Catholic schooling. And so much of it comes from my mother, you know, because my father died when I was 8 years old and my mother became my primary caregiver. So I learned so much from her. And it's amazing. Jennifer and I were just talking the other day, and we were just talking about all of the things that your mother teaches you that you don't think about with respect to manners and being polite and please and thank you. So I try to meet people that way so that in my mind, I like to think they're getting the best parts of me. And so with Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Cosby and Herb Adderley, guys that I grew up in Philly with, that was kind of our philosophy of being the best person we could be to each other.
So I feel like you're hanging out with those kind of guys. I'm at home rearranging my sock drawer. You know, it's just a little bit of a different existence.
Well, you know, it's a big. It's like I tell you, Bob, the big thing for me, as that with that philosophy of growing up in Philadelphia, was going to school my freshman year in New York and living in Brooklyn. Because when I went to New York and I'm in Brooklyn and then I'm in Manhattan and then I'm in Harlem and then I'm in the Bronx, and I learned how to travel to those areas within 1 year. I became a New Yorker. And again, New Yorkers, if you want to find a great New Yorker, all you have to do is walk up to somebody and say hello. And that New Yorker will say, yeah, I'm a great guy. I'm the best that's ever did it. I'm the best. And it just astounded me that what was like big city living versus Philadelphia living, you know? And I found that out in California too.
I'm a California guy, born and bred. Don't hold that against me, but that's where I come from. But years ago when I was a young man, I took my first trip to New York. When I was in the city, it took me about a half a day to actually start like, hey, I'll have a hot dog and a cup of coffee. It's like, I don't know what happened to me. It was like I was New York, I was citified, you know what I mean? Like within like a half a day.
Yeah, it's phenomenal how as we cross the planet, you know, and I was telling Laurie, now one of my I did not know Laurie, and I told her this. I said, Laurie, one of the most favorite places I've ever been in terms of it being in my life has been Taos, New Mexico. I don't know why. It was just like I went to Taos, and I was in Santa Fe and I was in Albuquerque, great cities. But I went to this little city, Taos, and it's like for artists. And it was Latino artists, and the art was it just blew me away. And I was like, oh, this is such a wonderful place. And to this day, that's been one of the most favorite places I've ever visited. And the people were just wonderful. But when I met Laurie, I was telling her, I said, oh, Laurie, like Laurie's like any city kid. She's Albuquerque. She's thinking I'm going to talk about Albuquerque. And I said, well, then I went to Santa Fe, and I loved Santa Fe. We stayed in Santa Fe. But I said, Laurie, when I went to Taos, you had me.
Yeah.
That's where my birthday this summer, I'm going to be 60.
Oh my goodness.
And that's part of my goal is I'm going to do a huge hike by the gorge, the Taos Bridge over the big gorge there, and then go have a steak after that. That's my birthday plan.
Nice.
But what about you, Bob? I mean, really, you've traveled, I mean, how many countries? I know you've been to Israel, and Ireland, and
Mostly the States. I've had a few stops in, Israel, and I went to the UK for the first time a couple of years ago, and I went on there's a wonderful group out of Colorado Springs called Compassion that does a child sponsorship and so forth. So I went on a trip to Ecuador with them in the late 80s, but mostly it's been the US and Canada. But, as you all know, Ray, going around to different, you have several, when you go around to the different states, you have several sort of little countries all in the big country. So, and even within Texas, you've got like 3 or 4 countries within Texas, right? Depending on where you go. So, yeah, I love the diversity. Of course, what I tell people is on paper, I'm going places to sing, but what I'm really doing is just eating my way across this great country of ours.
I knew we were going to get to food. Every time I talk to Coach, at the end of the conversation, somehow we have wandered on to talking about food.
I don't know what it is. I mean, obviously I eat recreationally. I mean, this is not just hormones, but like when I go to, I love Southern cooking, like when in doubt, fry it.
Yeah.
I love the whole, like you can go to like 5 different restaurants and get low country shrimp and grits, and it's all going to be the same dish, but it's all going to be different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I love that. So I used to have a friend, he passed away a few years ago, but I would call him. He was kind of a road dog too. And so I'd say, well, I'm headed for Philly. Where's the cheesesteak place that I need to go to? And he would tell me, and then I would go, and that'd be my, because I'm not a very adventurous travel. I don't get in the car and drive around or hit the museum or anything. I'm not overly adventurous in that regard. But I love going out after a concert with folks and kind of having the cast party and grabbing a bite. And I love doing that stuff.
The regret that I have as one who has been fortunate enough to travel the United States and parts of the world, but the regret that I have, and I had it when I had my daughters, when I had Allison and Devin and Nia, but I also had Chip and Karen and David and Deborah in Philadelphia. But when I remarried with Jennifer, we had 3 daughters, and we were traveling quite a bit, and I would go with my daughters and Jennifer, and I became a spectator. I became a tourist. And when you become a tourist, you see the world completely different. And I said, I wasted 6 trips a year, to California, and I never saw anything. I was in San Diego, I was in Los Angeles, I was in San Francisco, which has become my favorite city, by the way. But because of their menus, and my family. But as I traveled, I said, I didn't see museums, I didn't see statues, all of the sites that you have in California. I began to see them in my 40s and 50s, as opposed to my 20s and 30s. So well, we're kindred spirits in that regard.
I would expect perhaps even more than I would ever be as a musician. When you fly to someplace, you're really focused on the job. So people will look at my schedule and they'll say, man, you must have fun traveling to all these places. Yeah. And I said, yes, that's true, but it's the airport, the hotel, the concert, the hotel, the airport.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't have a lot of time to get out there and mix it up with people, unless I have a day off or something.
Right. Right. And Californian conversions always throw me. I had met Richie Havens in Brooklyn. He was a Brooklyn guy.
No, I didn't know that.
He was very, very Brooklyn, very Brooklyn. And after Woodstock, if you recall, he made this big move to California. And when he made the move, when Richie made the move to California, and I saw him again, I'm like, he's a California guy. He's no longer Richie Havens from Brooklyn. You know, like Tony Curtis is from the Bronx or Burt Lancaster is from the Bronx. And they go to California and they become Californians with the tan and the hair and the clothes and the, you know, and it's amazing how I've seen people adapt around the world. But the biggest adaptation I see in America is from anybody going anywhere in the country going to California and how they become Californians.
Yeah, well, and that's the good news and the bad news, depending on what we're talking about, right?
So, Bob, I mean, think about this. So we know Philly cheesesteak, and I'm from Chicago originally. We got hot dogs and pizza and all kinds of other food, but we're really known for that. And then in Albuquerque, of course, we're known for our certain kind of New Mexican food, red and green chili, and a lot of Native American influence. Really, what's the food of California?
You know, in the Bay Area, they've kind of developed, Alice Waters and some of those people developed kind of a California cuisine thing. I think kind of in the 70s or maybe the 80s, they started developing things that became identified, but it's not like you can come to California and say, okay, I had pierogies, you know, here, but in California, here's what you get when you come to California. You know, I would say, you know, I mean, now there's very specific things like you can make an expatriate Southern Californian. If they move out of California and you go to visit them, you can make them break out in tears if you just say In-N-Out double, right?
Okay.
Because they love that burger. But it's not, it's like a native thing, but it's not the same thing as you're asking. It's not like a branch of cuisine that is specific to the state. I'm not a sharp enough knife in the drawer to know the answer to that question.
Well, I have chef friends that would answer that, you know, California cuisine, but I don't know if I could put my finger on it. But Ray, outside of cheesesteaks, is Philly known for other kinds of food?
First of all, Philly is really known for our delis. And we're known, of course, for pizza. And what we're really known for, if you can tell a true Philadelphian, because what you're noted for is seafood. We are one of the capitals of seafood because we're near the Chesapeake Bay. Now, the capital of seafood is Baltimore and the Chesapeake Bay on the East Coast. But Philadelphia got a piece of that with one of the number one restaurants, and Bob, you'll recognize this when I say it, one of the number one restaurants in America is Bookbinders. And Bookbinders is the oldest seafood restaurant in Philadelphia. And I grew up for years walking around Philadelphia, seeing the Bookbinders windows. And this goes back years and years and years with the crabs crawling in the encasement in the window, and it would say Bookbinders. And Bookbinders was just, if you want to go and be on the inn in Philadelphia, that's one of the places you go. You say, I'm going to Bookbinders, and you can sound like a native.
That's funny.
Well, I'm getting hungry in this conversation, but
well, look at who you're talking to.
But let's kind of go back to music a little bit here. When Ray was in the NBA and traveling around, he met also so many famous musicians. And I think you told me one time it's because, you know, after the game, then you go to the clubs when those guys were just starting to play, and you were finished for the evening. Yeah.
Right. And it was, and I know, you know, Bob will recognize this, but I was a jazz guy, number one, but I was a music person. I love music. I mean, I'm one of the few people in the world that you can talk to that has a collection of music that includes an album and a record called Stromboli, because I collected music from the time I was 12 years old. And my mother bought me a box, and I would put my little 89 cents together for not a 33 and a third, 45 and a 78. The 78 was 89 cents. the 45 was about 50 cents or 59 cents. And if you got the album, the LP, that was like $1 or $2 because you had like 8 tunes on that album. Well, I started out with Dave Brubeck and Miles Davis and Richie Powell and, just going, those guys were very visible. Coltrane was a Philly guy. I didn't find out. I'm 81 years old. I didn't find out until I was 80 that John Coltrane lived in Philadelphia. I didn't know
that either.
He married a Philadelphia lady and he lived in Philadelphia. And when they divorced, he moved to New York and he married Alice Coltrane, the harpist. Well, that's where I know him from New York and the harpist. But those guys, the Aretha Franklins of the world, I've sat right and talked to her just like I'm speaking with you, Bob, because we had those days. The famous Billie Holiday, was arrested right down the street from where I went to school, where I went to elementary school. She was arrested in this Showboat hotel and was very famous for it on a Sunday morning. And it was just big news all over South Philly. Seeing them, Dizzy Gillespie, seeing Dinah Washington, when you would see people, then you would just rush out and buy their music or listen to their music. And you would become fans because of that. There was no television. So we weren't, as kids, we weren't reaching their fandom through access. We actually reached the fandom through seeing them and walking among them and being part of them.
Well, of course, there was an element of this person is well known and celebrity and so forth once they build a reputation. But I would think it was still where the tail was not wagging the dog. The music was still the thing that mattered as opposed to somebody's celebrity or,
amen,
that sort of thing. Now we have people who are famous for being famous and whatever. Sometimes the talent they have is secondary actually to everything else that's going on.
It's how it's promotions. But in those days, there was no distancing. So I could walk up and say, "Hi, Mr. Max Roach. My name is Ray Scott, or I'm Ray Scott, and I just wanted to meet you." Or Mr. Joe Williams, or Mr. Basie. I know
all those names.
Yeah, because you just meet them in a very casual, going back to what Laurie was saying earlier, you meet them and you can assess very quickly, boy, they're really nice people. Well, you want to be a nice people too in meeting them. So it was really a great time in Philadelphia to walk and be among those people and see them as people. And then going to New York, going to New York was such an expansion of that for me because then I learned Latin American music. Tito Puente, I love the great Celia Cruz. Celia Cruz is someone that people don't know about. And she's one of the finest singers that ever graced the planet. Ever graced the planet.
Check it out. My beloved mother-in-law who lives with us, she will be 85 in September.
God bless her.
Her father, because her mother married older when she was a young woman, her father was the consul general of Cuba before Castro took over.
Okay. Oh.
So she grew up in a diplomatic household and was exposed to all of this incredible music in Havana and also Miami.
Yes.
And so, a lot of these musicians and people that you were talking about, they, so if I make her a playlist on Spotify and I have Celia Cruz and I have different people, you can see like about 30 years come off her when this music comes on.
Oh, yes.
It was just, she starts singing and she knows it's really good.
I love that. That is so much of what I see in music is how music will touch someone's spirit. And you can just, it's like a metamorphosis. You just see this change in this person and they're changing as they're acclimating to the music in their life. Because music is part of our life. We don't think about, I think about it. I think my life is a musical. I like to think of my life as a musical. You know, I'm a Guys and Dolls guy, you know, so.
He's a big Sinatra fan too.
Big Sinatra fan. Sinatra, Marlon Brando, Quincy Jones. But I just think music is so beautiful, like in talking to Laurie and talking about her being an operatic singer. It's just incredible to me that I know someone that is an operatic singer and has been part of that life, because in talking to you, Bob, and I'm sure you get it, it's like that music, just listening to your music today. I listened to your music today because that's where I got the Burl. I said, oh, he's got a little Burl Ives thing going on here, you know? But it's important to me. It's because I think of my life as a musical.
So now I think Bob would be a good time to share this song with Coach.
Oh, sure.
Bob's going to sing this for us live. And here's the thing is, I think this is going to lead us back into, we're going to talk a little sports again too. So I love how music, sports, food, you know, all mixes together. What's not to like, right? Okay, here's Bob Bennett.
Okay, so a little bit about this song, and it's amazing to me, and I'm not afraid to do it, but to sing this song for someone who has had the level of achievement that you have in sports, this song actually sort of talks in the opposite direction, but it talks about something that's universal. The point is this: I was a husky kid in Downey, California, playing Little League, and I was terrible at it. I mean, the coach would leave me benched until the game was, 64-0. Okay, we can put that Bennett kid in now, you know? And I would be like in the twilight zone of Little League, the Bermuda Triangle, you know, they put you in right field. Because when you're a kid, nothing goes into right field unless it goes there by mistake, right? So this is how you keep this kid from like wrecking your entire life. So I played one completely underwhelming season of Little League. But the point is, my dad came to every one of my games that year. And so I wrote this song for my dad. And when I first sang it to him, it was a wonderful thing because my dad cried and I did not. So that was something we weren't expecting. And so it's called A Song About Baseball. Saturdays on the baseball field, and be afraid of the ball. Just another kid on camera day, when the Angels still played in LA. I was smiling, living black and white. Baseball caps and bubble gum, I think there's a hole in my glove. 3 and 2, life and death. I was swinging with eyes closed, holding my breath. I was dying on my way to the bench. But none of it mattered after the game, when my father would find me and call out my name. A soft drink, a snow cone, a candy bar, a limousine ride in the family car. He loved me, no matter how I played. He loved me, no matter how I play. But none of it mattered after the game, when my father would find me and call out my name. Dreaming of glory the next time out, my father showed me what love is about. He loved me, no matter how I played. He loved me. No matter how I play, he loved me. No matter how I play. La 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 la. La 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 la. But none of it mattered after the game, when my father would find me and call out my name. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. What a gift. As I just said earlier, I was thinking as you were so wonderfully singing to something that touches my heart, because I went to watch my little girls play Little League, whatever it is, that ball where they set it up and hit it and run around the bases and stuff.
Oh, T-ball.
If I may, I would love to share this with your song with them.
Well, I'll send you a link. There's a guy, a friend of mine now in South Carolina, that did a wonderful video on YouTube. There's no need for me to ever do a video for that song because he made the perfect one. And I'll send it to you. It's really cool.
So,
I want to share yours. Number one, it's a connector between you and I.
Well, it's me singing the song, but it's his video of like his son in Little League and stuff with some other players. So it's my music and his visuals.
Okay. All right. It touched me deeply. I thank you. As I said, our lives are, it's music. It's predicated on music. Thank you.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
and then a couple of things. Another time, he has these two songs that you have to hear, Coach, that I know you will love. It's called the King of Summer Street, or the King.
Kings of Summer Street, yeah.
Kings of Summer Street. And you will totally get it, being the little kid growing up on the streets in Philly.
Yes.
This one will touch you too. But so we'll do that the next call we do, if you don't mind, Bob.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Be happy to.
Yeah, I'd do it today, but we're kind of doing a marathon, right? But also Ray and I talk about baseball all the time and our love of baseball. And of course, he grew up playing basketball even on the streets in Philly, but we really connected on the baseball front, especially. So,
Ray, if you don't mind, if you don't feel like you're like part of the Spanish Inquisition, as Monty Python would say, I had a question. Are you one of those guys that played multiple sports and then settled on basketball, or was it always a basketball?
No, you nailed it. Because of our era, back in the when I was growing up in the 40s and 50s, you played everything because it wasn't a question of a team. It was a question of the neighborhood. And so it was the sport of the day. So hey, Ray, that was my nickname, but I won't use my nickname. I don't think it's appropriate any longer. But they would say, hey, Ray, you're playing first base or you're playing center field. And occasionally I had to play right field. So I knew that right away. But we played football, we played baseball. And our baseball, we would play with a little pimple ball, and then we didn't have bats. We would bat the ball with our fists. And so baseball, you could play very easily. And you saw it with Willie Mays in the stickball in New York. When New York, they played stickball because they got a stick. But everything was just built on a neighborhood entitlement of what group you belong to, because then there was a swimming group, and there were the guys that could do the flips, were the guys who were gymnastic. They were gymnasts, and we call them flippers because they could flip.
Yeah.
So you did in your neighborhood. Guys found a way. I remember now guys finding a way to bring their talent to the fore. So until Wilt Chamberlain there was no decided superstar basketball. Neighborhoods just had basketball players, baseball players, football players. So it was really decided by neighborhoods until you went to high school. You know, there were no developmental leagues and little leagues and all that stuff. You just went out and played sandlot. You played on the sandlot.
Right.
Yeah.
And people couldn't afford equipment, right, Ray? You've told me.
Yes, that's correct. No one had cleats. Having spikes and baseball with spikes, gloves, bat. If we got the bat and we got the ball, we felt fortunate. But the big thing for the kids in our eras, because we didn't have the equipment, was to play softball. Well, see, in basketball, you needed one ball and 10 or 15 guys could play all day with one basketball. Yeah. So that was easy. Hockey was out of the question. And football was literally out of the question because of we played touch tag or whatever you wanted to call it, but it wasn't really tackle football until we got to be bigger kids. So
if it was neighborhood based, then other than like maybe the occasional impromptu race or something, foot race, there wasn't really, I'm guessing there wasn't a whole lot of track stuff because that's more of a school organizational type of thing, right?
Yeah. You don't play track.
Yeah.
Nobody plays track. In fact, I had a guy, Ira Davis, who was I think he was an Olympic broad jumper that went to LaSalle University. He was the guy that told me about that. We were talking about track one day, and I was talking about long jump, because in track, I tried to do all those things, shot put, long jump, high jump. And I was telling him how tough it was. He said, well, Ray, you don't grow up doing those things because no one plays track.
Yeah.
You practice and try to improve your personal best, but you don't just say, hey, Mom, can I go outdoors and play track?
Yeah. You don't get 10 other guys together and say, want to have a meet?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Although I will say, when I was a little girl, I set up army obstacles in my backyard to run through.
Well, you were quite creative as a little girl, I must say. No one knows that you could also bat. You could also play basketball, and I think your given height is 5'4" with a stretch.
Well, yeah, around there. I would love to, our basketball hoop in the backyard here is 7 foot. And I'm thinking Ray's 6'9", he would have just stood there like throwing a piece of paper in the wastebasket,
I would love to play on that type of basket, but I wouldn't want to have other big guys.
Speaking of which, I have to tell you, you gave me my first laugh out loud of the morning when I was reading an interview from 2015 in the Baltimore Sun. A writer named Matt Klingman interviewed you. And here's what he mentioned, and don't mean to put you on the spot because I know the answer, but I want to see if you remember. He writes, half a century later at the time, he sometimes still gets the urge to drive to the hoop. And then you had a very funny quote that made me laugh out loud. Do you remember what it was?
Yes. Then I go and lie down on the couch and I feel better about it.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. As we say, nothing but net. That's very funny.
Right.
Yeah. Don't you belong to some sort of lazy boy club now, Coach?
Not any longer with the pandemic.
Is it too late to get an endorsement deal with those guys?
You know what? We had the Buddies and Pals Club. We had Club Zucchini, and we had our Lazy Boys group. It's amazing how, as you age, you get more and more into these very strong-based philosophical groups.
I'm surprised now that I'm thinking about it. I wish I don't have any way to monetize this, and but it'd be great. A company like Lazy Boy should literally get the great retired athletes and have them be endorsers, because it would be very, very funny to have all these guys who have been at the pinnacle of everything. It's like, man, I'm retired.
That's right.
This is my chair of choice.
I've never, I haven't had one different for 15, 20 years. You know, I've been one of the greatest consumers of, because they don't last long.
Yeah.
You get so much usage and they have moving parts.
Yeah,
And
you know, imagine if Lazy Boy could work out a way and maybe pair it with charity or something,
yeah,
where they could say Lazy Boy, the official recliner of the NBA.
that would be great. It is, and it is the truth.
Yeah.
I have a neighbor that used to play for the NFL, and why? The team is slipping my mind right now. Douglas Kraft, and I was saying, oh, you know, we have a gym at our house and a trainer here, and he's like, I played in sports all my life. The last thing I want to do is work out.
That's right. Yeah, he doesn't want to hang with Coach. You know? Yeah, no way.
Oh gosh, Bob.
Yeah, we do these reps at the refrigerator. You know.
Yeah. That's my rep. My rep is more like this.
Yeah, there we go. And you want to be ambidextrous, you know.
That's it. Either hand. That's right.
Okay, I got to go back. What was the Zucchini Club? I'm dying to know.
Oh, you would. Club Zucchini was for guys that would try to give you a con job, and that came out of New York. Oh, okay. You want to put me in Club Zucchini? So I don't need to say more.
Wow. Okay. I don't know where to go with that, Bob.
Don't.
Well, I know that after we sign off, I'm going to Google it.
Club Zucchini. And that would always be, oh, okay. Oh, he's trying to put you in Club Zucchini, huh? Yeah, he is. He's trying to sock it to me, boy. This is the rough life. And actually, that came from the radio world.
Did it?
My friend Doc Mark Andrews, who was my buddy. Laurie, I told you about him. Bob doesn't know about Doc Andrews. He's a fabled character in Michigan. He's 4'7" tall. He was a dwarf. He was a radio star. He was a guy, if you heard him on the radio, you would swear he was 6'2" and 200 pounds.
Uh-huh.
And he was a 4'7", and we became a radio team for the University of Detroit. So we traveled around the country together to the various schools to do the radio in 1980 for the University of Detroit. We did it 80 through 82. And I was the best man at his wedding. He's 4'7", I'm 6'9", and I was his best man. We are godfather to each other's children. He died, he made his transition. He went home to be with our Lord back in 1990s, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it was a big loss in my life, but he was just, and there's a picture I have on my page, on my timeline page on Facebook of us wearing our Stetsons traveling, and People magazine took the picture. But the thing I remember most about Mark with his sense of humor, and as we're talking about Club Zucchini, we got on an elevator in Chicago one day. We had just landed in Chicago, and I think we were playing, the school was going to play Loyola. So we're going to the hotel night before, and we're going to go have dinner and go to the bar and do some dancing and having fun and stuff. And so we said, well, let's go up to our room. And we get on the elevator to go up to our room. And this little lady's standing there. And she looks at us, and as she's looking at us, she says, oh my gosh, how tall are you? And as I was about to respond, Mark said, I'm 4'7". Why? So that was, so I said, that's it, ma'am. You get nothing from me. And that was the way, that was his sense of humor, though. As we traveled, he would, for instance, he was in charge of renting the cars. He would rent Volkswagens.
Wow.
He was in charge of getting the seats.
How did you get in the Volkswagen?
I managed. I managed.
Gosh, your knees must have been up to your chin.
Oh, he'd just be laughing. He was just thinking it was the funniest thing in the world. Because actually Volkswagens were a lot bigger than people think, you know, but because I could comfortably get into a Volkswagen if you let the seats back. There was no one that could sit in the back of the car, obviously.
Right.
But he was just the funny guy. And that was just the way his sense of humor just was amazing to me as we traveled the country.
That's really fun. Well, you know, I think we need to do this again. I think Bob said something about Thursdays with Ray.
No.
He's like,
It's enjoyable. But I'll tell you what, there's one caveat though. Bob, you will have to sing. So you're going to have to put on your chops every Thursday to hit us with a song.
I'd be happy to do it. I'd be happy to do it.
That was meaningful, my friend. That was meaningful.
Well,
maybe you could, maybe if you're, you know, I mean, we should have put him on the bench because of his injury, huh, Coach?
Yeah, he was trying to get out of right. He was trying to get out in right field.
But so I was going to say, I don't know, are you hurting, Bob? But you could take us out with one song if you wanted to, or if you want to wait till you're healed.
No, let me grab my guitar here and hold on.
Well, you guys, while he's getting set up, this has been so fun. I mean, I could go on, you know, this is like you just had a great dinner out and now you're all sitting around and telling stories and playing some music. I mean, that's my kind of day.
Toast. I'm still at lunchtime.
We're still at lunchtime?
I'm just kidding.
You're ahead of us.
No, you're ahead of me, aren't you?
No.
Oh, that's right. I'm Mr. Dark here. I'll be
You're
getting
Mr. East Coast. Yeah.
That's right. What am I doing here?
Well, Ray, thank you so much. And I'll look forward to doing this again. And we'll let Bob take us out with whatever song you pick. I like them all.
Okay. Okay, so this is a song called Altar in the Field. And even though I know that it is a good thing for me to be grateful, and not just grateful, but to know who I'm being grateful to the Lord, but sometimes things go so well that I get amnesia and I forget to be grateful. I have to remind myself.
Right.
Well, this was a problem that the nation of Israel, when they were wandering around in the desert, had. And so what they would often do is God would intervene, and then they would build a physical monument right in that place where it happened to remind themselves of what had happened. So I can't nail two boards together without hurting myself, but I build songs, and so I just scatter those songs around. So this is a song of gratitude, and it's called Altar in the Field. I build an altar in the field, so I'll remember back to this time when it's so real that I am loved and not alone. And if I pass by here again, I'll be able to see my life was scattered like these stones till the Lord began to gather me. I build an altar in the field, so I'll remember. I build an altar in this field in honor, in memory of the many graces I've been shown and the ones I've yet to see. And so I leave this symbol fashioned by my hand the marker of a love that I will never understand. I built an altar in the field. And when I'm lost inside my sorrow, overtaken by my fear, when I am wandering in this wilderness, perhaps the Lord will lead me to this altar in the field, where I'll remember, oh, I will remember.
Wow.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, honey.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob, so much. Well,
Pleasure.
I would love to just keep going. Kind of like Bob does these live concerts every week now on Facebook. And man, he could sing for 3-4 hours.
Well, I don't know what happened. My 65th birthday was on March 21st. And I don't know what got into me, but I got on Facebook and I sat down in front of my computer just like I'm doing now. And for 3 hours and 45 minutes straight without getting up, I sang and visited with people.
Oh.
And so I call it the miracle of the bladder, because at a certain point, guys like us don't sit down for 3 hours and 45 minutes at a time. You know what I mean?
And when you have to answer the bell at our age, you have to answer the bell.
That's correct. So it was kind of a miracle.
That's it.
All right. Well, I hate to end this party, but I'm just going to, stop our recording for now. And I just thank you guys, but don't go away. Okay.
I hope to be continued.
I hope, as do I.